All right, welcome back everybody to the workshop on matches made in heaven, theoretical computer science and cryptography. So today we are really excited to have three speakers who are gonna tell us about this recent exciting development on how to build obfuscation from standard assumptions. Our speakers are Giulio Malavolta, Romain Gay, and Daniel Wicks. And they're going to tell us different ways to build obfuscation. And without further ado, let's start with our first speaker, Giulio. Giulio, whenever you are ready, you can share the screen.
Okay, I think I am sharing my screen. I hope you can all see that. If it looks weird, it's because it's a scrolling thing, so don't be worried. So today I'm going to start this session, and I'm going to talk about obfuscation from homomorphic encryption scheme. This is really meant to be like a unique talk between me, Roman, and Daniel. So we're going to really try to not repeat the same thing twice. All I want to say is that on our side, this line of work has been done in cooperation with Vika Brakerski, Nico Dotling, and Sanjay Garg. And yeah, with that being said, the results that we're going to see today is the first result and the only result of this session is going to be a new candidate construction of indistinguishability obfuscation, which has several upgrades with respect to prior work. I think one of the most important and one of the things that I believe it's the most interesting aspect of our approach in general is that it is simple to understand and it's modular. So I think with this 1 hour talk you'll be able to grasp all the main ideas of the approach, and you'll be able to hopefully reconstruct yourself all the missing technical details. The second aspect that I want to highlight about the approach is that it is entirely based on LWE-based techniques, and therefore we can at least conjecture that the resulting indistinguishability obfuscation scheme is still secure even in the presence of a universal quantum machine. In contrast with other candidates, with other research candidates of obfuscation. And the third point that I think is also very important is that the assumption that we reduce our construction against is simple, and it's simple to state, and it's in a sense all the assumptions that will be presented in this work are related somehow to circular security of some encryption schemes. And for those of you who are not familiar with the notion of circular security, it is basically on a very high level is the fact that a certain encryption scheme retains CPA security or semantic security, even in the presence of a key cycle, where a key cycle is essentially an encryption of a secret key under a certain key. So here in the slides, it's depicted a 2-key cycle, but you can further abstract away this notion. And although all the schemes that are part of this line of work come up with a slightly different variant of this notion, I think underlying there is always a flavor of circularity, so of circular security. Good. So with that being said, since I'm the first speaker, I have to give a little bit of introduction about indistinguishability obfuscation and at least present the definition of I/O for those of you who have never seen it. Intuitively, indistinguishability obfuscation allows us to take a program represented as a circuit P, scramble is internal code in such a way that the functionality of the circuit is untouched, is preserved. So if we evaluate a circuit on a certain input X, the output should be identical as we evaluate the obfuscated circuit on the same input X. And the only security we demand for indistinguishability obfuscation is that if two circuits P0 and P1 are syntactically identical, then their obfuscation should be computationally indistinguishable. And while this might seem like a weak notion, this is in some sense the best notion that we can hope for indistinguishability obfuscation, and this is actually a very powerful beast that we are dealing with. And here is my poor attempt to draw the land of amazing primitives that obfuscation brings us to. In particular, currently, obfuscation is the only way we know how to construct things like universal samplers, functional encryptions, non-interactive key exchange, multilinear maps, and so on. Besides that, these are probably something which is interest for cryptographer. But besides that, obfuscation is a very fundamental flavor, and it's in some sense it has been said that it's like the crypto complete primitive. So once you have obfuscation, you basically have most of the developments in cryptography up to polynomial factors. So let me give you a little bit of context. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of I/O and about different approaches that we have out there in order to construct this primitive, and then I will explain a little bit more about our framework. So the first work that introduces obfuscation constructed from an object which is called multilinear maps, which was introduced in the same year by Garg et al. Those candidates have received a lot of cryptanalysis and generate a lot of interest in the communities. Unfortunately, this line of work has not resulted in a construction which we can prove secure and under a standard or nice assumption that we are all comfortable with. Slightly after this development, researchers were motivated to place I/O in a firmer ground, and they studied how I/O can be developed from something which is called functional encryption, which is intimately related to I/O. And this has culminated with the recent breakthrough result of Jane et al., which we saw in a previous talk in this workshop, where they placed I/O and constructed SIO from a set of well-understood assumptions, which are specifically some variant of LPN, the LW assumption, the SXTA assumption over bilinear maps, and the existence of a pseudo-random generator in NC0. So this was a great result. It was very surprising. And one maybe unsatisfactory aspect of this result is that it seemingly inherently relies on bilinear maps and on certain hard problems over bilinear maps. And in particular, this means that this scheme is trivially broken by a quantum computer. So it doesn't, in a sense, we cannot even conjecture that this construction is secure against a quantum machine. So in parallel, there have been these different approaches. Some of them perhaps not as popular, but still worth mentioning. So, for example, there has been a work of Gentry et al. Showing how to do obfuscation from tensor products. A recent work of Bartusek et al. That showed how to construct obfuscation and witness encryption from a new object that they call fine determinant programs. And finally, the approach that is more relevant for this talk from Brakerski et al. Eurocrypt 2020, which showed how to construct obfuscation from an interplay of homomorphic encryption schemes, which is going to be the focus of this talk, and is the work that somehow can be seen as the common denominator between all these three talks that you're going to see today. So let me really quickly give you an introduction about the framework, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this component later. So the basic idea to construct I/O from this for this framework is to go through a new object that was called a split fully homomorphic encryption scheme, which we're going to define next. And split fully homomorphic encryption scheme was shown to be sufficient in order to construct exponential I/O, and it's well known that exponential I/O already implies I/O with the additional assumption of LW. And the technical heart of the work was to give a construction of split FHE, so split fully homomorphic encryption scheme, based on an interplay of homomorphic encryption schemes, such as essentially any fully homomorphic encryption scheme, such as, for example, GSW, the Damgard-Urich encryption scheme, and in addition, in this work they also needed random oracle to prove some sort of security of their construction. And this was a sort of a big depart from the state of the art for constructing obfuscation. One of the most interesting features is that it is, again, a very conceptually, at least conceptually simple framework. The paper is actually quite short and can be understood without really a lot of knowledge of the area. Unfortunately, on the more negative side, the paper did not present any security proof under any simple assumption in the standard model. And in addition to that, it is post-quantum broken for the simple reason that the downgrade encryption scheme, its security is intimately related with the problem of factoring large number. Of course, if you have a quantum computer, we can do that in polynomial time. So the scheme is trivially insecure. And this essentially led to these new results, which we are going to see today. And again, the common flowchart for this result is to go through this concept, which is called exponential I/O, which I'm going to explain next, and somehow construct exponential I/O based only on LWE based crypto systems. So let's be yeah. So and we somehow we managed to prove so this work managed to prove security under simple to state and somewhat convincing, but still new assumptions. And again, as I alluded before, all these assumptions have in common that have somewhat a flavor of circular security, and which is so circular security is well known in the crypto community, because it's essentially the only way to get the bootstrapping theorem to work in order to get a fully homomorphic encryption scheme. This is somewhat a stronger flavor of circular security, but I don't want to talk more about this because I'm sure that Roman and Daniel will elaborate a bit more on this. So I'm just going to leave it there, and if you have questions, please ask them at the end. And again, as a bonus, since we rely only on LWE-based crypto systems, the scheme can be plausibly conjectured to be secure even in a post-quantum regime. Okay, so to give a little bit of context, now I'm going to define what is exponential I/O, XIO in short. So XIO is an obfuscation for circuit, as we discussed before, with the relaxation that we do not consider any polynomial size circuits, but we consider only circuits with a binary output 0 or 1, and with the n-size domain where n is some polynomial in the security parameter, which means in particular that the domain of the circuit is not exponential. So these are very weak class of circuits that we are setting to obfuscate. So this should make our life much easier. So in particular, this also means that we can go over the whole domain of the circuit in polynomial time. And besides the security definition that we already presented from I/O, the only requirement that we impose for exponential I/O is that of non-triviality. And the non-triviality means that essentially that the size of the obfuscated circuit should be exponentially smaller than the size of the function or of the circuit domain. In particular, should be smaller than n to the power of 1 over epsilon for some epsilon greater than 0. So that's really it. So there's really nothing else that we impose from exponential I/O. And it is actually a very elegant result from Lin et al. They show that if XIO exists and the LWE problem is hard, then there exists actually indistinguishability obfuscation for all circuits. So this makes our life much easier, as we now can forget about all the I/O and just construct exponential obfuscation. And again, recall that this should be a much easier task because the class of circuit that we consider is much more restricted. And one thing which is going to be useful for our results is that this theorem from Lin et al. Holds also in the preprocessing model. What does the preprocessing model means? It's very simple. It means that we can consider an XIO that takes as input also a CRS from the sky. So the obfuscator, in order to produce the obfuscated circuit, can query the CRS, which is some uniformly sampled random string. And the size of the CRS can be even as large as the domain of the function. So the CRS can be as long as we want. And it turns out that this relaxed version of XIO is still sufficient to imply IO. So, and note that even though we have a CRS for XIO, our IO still will not be in the CRS model. So more specifically, the theorem is that if XIO exists in the CRS model with a long CRS, then XIO exists in the plane model, so without CRS. Okay, so I'm not going to say more about XIO. So all I want to introduce now is our golden hammer, what we're going to construct throughout the rest of this talk, which is the notion of split fully homomorphic encryption and the twin notion of functional encoding. And I'm going to explain a little bit how these two notions are connected. So first, I'm going to explain what split fully homomorphic encryption looks like. So split fully homomorphic encryption scheme is just a normal fully homomorphic encryption scheme where I can encrypt a message M and homomorphically evaluate a function F over the encrypted data. Once I obtain my evaluated ciphertext encrypting F of M, so the output of the function over the input M, I can call an additional algorithm, which is called the hinting algorithm, which takes as input the secret key and a certain ciphertext, and compute a hint for F of M. And I have the property that the hint allows me to recover the full F of M, even if I don't have the secret key from that specific ciphertext. So this is split fully homomorphic encryption scheme. I'm going to get to the property later, but now I want to show what functional encodings are. So essentially, functional encodings is just a generalization of split fully homomorphic encryption scheme, which imposes less structure on the primitive and says the following. So it consists of an encoding algorithm that takes as input a message and some random coins R. And given the random coins, I can compute, again, an opening which produces a hint. And a hint, together with the encoding, allows me to recover F of M. So it's not hard to see that you can construct a functional encoding given split FHE, and the contrary is not necessarily true because this is a primitive with less structure. So how do I define security for this tool? I should mention that even in this case, we can consider without loss of generality that both split FHE and functional encodings are going to take as input a CRS, which can be as large as we want. So this is, again, for the same reason as before, this is without loss of generality. So security says that the hint should not reveal anything besides the plaintext of the ciphertext that I'm given as an input, as otherwise, for example, like a trivial construction of hinting, a split FHE would be just to reveal the secret key. Of course, it's not interesting because it breaks all possible ciphertexts. We only want to reveal the content of one specific ciphertext. But this is also not entirely satisfactory because we could just set the hint to be the message F of M, which is the reason why we impose the second constraint, which is succinctness. And succinctness says that the size of the hint should be much smaller than the size of the message that you want to recover, which in our case is F of M. And the succinctness requirement really captures the essence of I/O in the sense that it really shows you where the compression comes from. And compression, as we saw before, is really the heart of constructing XIO. And the last thing that I want to talk about, and then I'm going to leave the stage to Roman and Daniel, is how to use our split FHE or functional encoding in order to construct XIO. And I'm going to be very brief about this because the construction is actually very simple. And I'm going to give you an even more simplified construction, but I'm sure that you can all get the actual construction once you grind over the details a little bit. So in order to obfuscate the circuit, all I'm doing is just giving away an encryption of the circuit C, homomorphically evaluate the circuit C over all possible inputs 1 to n. Recall that n was a polynomial, so I can do that. This is the why it's very convenient to work with XIO. And then I obtained essentially an FHE encryption of the circuit evaluated at all points, which is basically the truth table of the circuit. I can take this ciphertext and compute the hint using my secret key. Now, the obfuscation of my circuit really just consists of the encryption of my circuit together with the hint that I just computed over the over the encryption of the truth table of the circuit C. This is going to be my obfuscation, and we can already check that this satisfies the succinctness requirement. In particular, we know that the FHE encryption of C is just a polynomial factor larger than C, and by the succinctness requirement, we know that the hint is going to be much smaller than the truth table of C, which is exactly what we wanted. And how do we evaluate this obfuscated circuit? Well, the evaluation is quite natural. We can essentially repeat the process of before. Since we have the encryption of the circuit C, we can evaluate it over all possible inputs, recover the encryption of the truth table, and this together with the hint is enough to recover the full truth table of the circuit. So this is, and then of course, once I have the truth table of the circuit, I can just look up the information that I'm interested in. So this was quite, that was it. It was quite simple. I must say that I slightly made my life slightly easier in the sense that I cheated a little bit, and in particular, I did not consider the size of the public key into the efficiency analysis. And this is going to be a problem for the actual construction because it turns out that the public key grows with the size proportional to the maximum plaintext space of your FHE scheme. In particular, if I do things naively, as I showed you before, this wouldn't really give you any compression because the public key would be too large. Fortunately, we can deal with this in a very easy way, and there is a simple trick to do that, to deal with that, which on a high level consists in partitioning the truth table of the circuit C into blocks, and then computing a hint for the evaluation of the circuit over all possible inputs belonging to a certain block. So basically, we amortize the size of the public key, giving not one, but essentially square root many hints. And you can check yourself that the parameters work. And for formal analysis, I refer you to the actual papers. So essentially the question that we have left, which Roman and Daniel are going to talk about, is how to build a split fully homomorphic encryption scheme and functional encodings. And that being said, I'd like to thank you for your attention and give the stage to the next two speakers. I hope I didn't run out of time.
No, don't worry. You guys have plenty of time until 7:30.
Good. Okay, so I guess I should start. Hi, everyone. So yeah, thank you for inviting me to talk here today. It's a great pleasure. And I will talk about indistinguishability obfuscation from circular security. That's a joint work with Rafael Paz. And it follows the same blueprint that Giulio just presented. All right, let me get right into it. So our result is to build IO from the standard learning wizard assumption and the new circular security assumption with respect to some particular fully homomorphic encryption. Let me explain a bit more what I mean by circular security. It's a very old idea that dates all the way back to the 70s. And in its general form, it's a design principle that is saying, suppose you have a secure protocol that uses an encryption scheme, then security is going to be preserved even if you add an encrypted secret key. In particular, suppose you are considering semantic security and its circular counterpart, then the typical assumption is to say for any natural scheme, semantic security implies circular semantic security. I have to say natural schemes because we know this heuristic is false in general. There are some schemes that are semantically secure, but which are not circular semantically secure. However, all of these counterexamples are very contrived. They are specifically designed for circular security to fail. And in that sense, they are artificial. So it's a typical assumption, reasonably widespread and conservative, to say, well, for any natural scheme, the implication holds. The most famous application of this, as Julio already mentioned, is the bootstrapping by Gentry to obtain unleveled FHE. And by unleveled, I mean an FHE where you can evaluate arbitrary depth circuit with no a priori bound. This is the only way we know how to do it, and it requires to have an encrypted secret key. And for this application, semantic security is sufficient. But in general, you may consider other interesting notions of security, such as, for instance, CCA security, leakage resilience, and so forth. And there is a natural strengthening of this circular heuristic, which is to say, well, for any natural scheme satisfying any natural notion of security, the security is preserved in the presence of an encrypted secret key. And this is a design principle that we are going to use. And as far as we know, it has never been broken for natural schemes. All right. So now let me rephrase our result a little bit more precisely. We build IO from LWE and a strong heuristic assumption with respect to a new security notion we introduce, which is referred to as shielded randomness leakage, SRL security. So roughly speaking, the adversary that tries to break this security will receive some information, some leakage on the randomness used to encrypt the message. This randomness will be protected by something we call a shield. So I will be more specific later. And then it's with respect to a scheme that is well known, that is the Gentry, Sahai, and Waters FHE scheme. More precisely, to prove our result, we first show that GSW is SRL secure, assuming the LWE assumption. Then we show that if we assume GSW is circular, SRL secure, and LWE, then we get IO. So combining the two together, we get our main theorem, which is assuming LWE and the strong circular heuristic with respect to the SRL security notion and the GSW scheme, we have IO. So now let me explain what I mean by SRL security, shielded randomness leakage. So you have an FHE, you have a bunch of encryptions of bits, M1 up to Mn. You can homomorphically evaluate a function on it. You get an evaluated ciphertext, which encrypts the function f evaluated on the messages. When you do this, you will also act on the randomness. So this will be an encryption under some randomness R sub f. And the extra property we consider is that you can compute this evaluated randomness directly from the original messages and the original randomness. Okay. And you can decrypt with a secret key, of course, but you can also open this evaluated ciphertext with this evaluated randomness. So consider an FHE with this property, which is in particular the case of GSW. And the leakage we consider is going to be this evaluated randomness, a shielded variant of this evaluated randomness for some functions f. So the first remark I want to make, since given this evaluated randomness, you can decrypt, you can open this evaluated ciphertext, and you reveal some information about the underlying message. If we want to prove some meaningful security, we'll have to restrict the functions f. In particular, we consider functions f whose output is already known by the adversary. It's predictable. Think of it as constant function for now, if you want. So the output, f of m, is not detrimental for security. The second remark is we cannot give RF, even if we restrict the functions f. RF itself, if you reveal it in the plane, it's insecure. So we need to shield it. So that's what I'm going to show. Yeah, by the way, I will use some notation. I will write this concatenation of bit encryption just like this. And now, so, okay, the SRL security is defined with a game. There is an adversary and he's interacting with the challenger. And it's like, for now, just an eCPA game. Nothing special. Except the only thing is we make it explicit. We make explicit the fact that there are many messages and many challenge ciphertexts. Remember, this is a notation for concatenations of many bit encryptions. This is important actually because the adversary will get some randomness leakage, some leakage on the randomness of all the ciphertext. All right, so how does it get this leakage? It interacts with an oracle and it goes in 3 rounds. First, the oracle will say, okay, here is some fresh encryption of 0 and there's some fresh randomness of star, upon which the adversary will choose a function f and a prediction alpha. And if the prediction is correct, which means f on this challenge message is equal to alpha, intuitively that means the adversary knows the output already. So there's no harm in revealing the leakage. So the leakage is set up to be this evaluated randomness, which is computed from these guys by randomness homomorphism, padded with this fresh randomness. And if the guess, the prediction alpha was incorrect, then the leakage is just some rejection sample. And we say the adversary fails. Okay. So we say the adversary wins. At the end, the adversary has to predict which bit was used, which message were encrypted. And we say the adversary win if he guesses correctly, and if he didn't fail, if he only made valid queries in green here. And we say a scheme is SRL secure if the adversary cannot win with probability significantly more than 1/2. And what we proved is GSW is SRL secure under LWE. And the circular variant of this is similar, except now the adversary is also provided with an encryption of the secret key. And note, it's important that the randomness leakage, this RF, manipulates the randomness of everything, the encryption, the ciphertext, the encryption of MB, and the encryption of SK. All right. Apart from that, so it's a similar security game. And we show that you can build IO if you assume that GSW is circular SRL secure, and if you assume LW.
Romain, can I interrupt you for a quick question?
Sure.
So if the secret key is part of F, the adversary is very unlikely to guess alpha, right?
No, it is. In our case, it will never fail. Like this. Yeah, they are functions. So the function F takes as input SK, but what it outputs, alpha, is not is something known. I can tell you concretely. F is basically taking an FHE ciphertext and of something it knows, a plain text it knows, and it decrypts it. So alpha is a decryption. So in that case, alpha is okay. You can reveal it, and the adversary knows it. So it is a useful notion, right? We can prove IO from it.
Okay.
But it's a bit subtle. I mean, yeah. The reduction, like in our proof, we will actually use an adversary that actually knows the alpha. Of course, otherwise it would be a useless adversary, actually, by definition. Yeah. It's not like a point function that outputs a secret key. That would not be okay. All right. So we actually believe this is a natural definition. And to show you this is the case, to illustrate a little bit, I will give you like a toy example, toy application where SRL could come up, this leakage. So suppose you have a database of private data, for example, not medical, like banking records, and you send them to a trusted party, Alice. And Alice will encrypt it for you and put it in the cloud, along with an encryption of 0. And then later on, someone asks you to prove some statement on your database, for example, that you have enough money on your bank account, and you want to prove this without revealing how much money you have. So you want to basically give a zero knowledge proof. You can ask Alice to give a zero knowledge proof. It will be short. It will just be the SRL leakage. And everybody can publicly verify that it's a valid proof. How do you do it? You take the encrypted database, you homomorphically evaluate F on it, you add this encryption of 0, and then you open and you check the result. So the proof is sound as long as the encryptions generated by Alice are proper. And it's actually zero knowledge if based on this SRL security. Technically, you would need to have a simulation SRL security, which we can actually prove, but I don't want to go into details. And then you can actually, Alice can actually give many proofs many times for many statements, and it will be short. So of course you can do this with DK snarg, but this is like a very simple and efficient way to do. But of course, yeah, you need to require that Alice is trusted and it computes all of this encryption of zero beforehand. All right, kind of an application of SRL. All right, so now let's go back to our results. And so as I said, there's two steps. First, we prove GSW is SRL secure from LWE, and then we prove IO from the circular SRL security of GSW. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to focus on theorem 2. And to prove it, we will follow the same blueprint, the same framework that Giulio already explained. So as he said, to build IO, all you need is a functional encoding, split FHE, a relaxed notion of split FHE, which is functional encoding. And so this is how I'm going to explain how the original BDGM construction did it, and then how our construction did it. Okay, so basically the first idea that comes to mind, you want to encode a bit string M. Okay, what do? You FHE encrypt it. That sounds like the right thing to do. And since we have this FHE with randomness homomorphism, it sounds also natural to, like the opening will be the evaluated randomness. And that's good because you can open actually with this. You can take the FHE, evaluate it, and open with it. But two problems with this: it's not succinct. The randomness for existing FHE. Daniel maybe will show you that they actually build an FHE where it is succinct, but before his work, that was not the case. We didn't know how to build FHE with succinct evaluated randomness. So that's the first problem. And the biggest problem is it's also insecure. Revealing RF, as I actually already said before, it's not secure. You break the security of FHE. So this is not what they do. They do something more sophisticated. They say, okay, well, the randomness is not short. But we know some homomorphic encryption with short randomness. Only they are not fully homomorphic. They are just additively homomorphic or linear. You can only compute additions. And the good thing is addition is already pretty good. You can almost FHE decrypt. FHE decryption is inner product and rounding. So you can perform the inner product. So with that in mind, they will use a proxy re-encryption. They will say, okay, you have an LHE encryption of an FHE secret key. You evaluate as before, and now you turn this FHE ciphertext into an LHE ciphertext. You proxy re-encrypt it. And then you open, not with the evaluated randomness of the FHE, but with the evaluated randomness of the LHE, which now is short. So now we have succinct opening or hits. Great. It's still not secure though. And one of the reasons it's not secure is because when you open, you reveal f of m, which you care about, but also some FHE decryption noise, right? Because you cannot round it out, because you cannot perform rounding. And that is detrimental for the FHE security. But then they say, okay, suppose you have this oracle that when invoked spits out an LHE, a fresh LHE encryption of some smudging noise. Then that's great. You can just add this to the LHE, and essentially the smudging noise will destroy every information about this FHE decryption noise. So that's it. So that's secure, but it's an idealized model. So then they show how to heuristically implement this oracle that's generating this fresh smudging noise. So the idea is, okay, assume you have a random oracle. Well, what it does is output some like random strings. You can actually say, well, every random string is a ciphertext. There is some LHE encryptions where the ciphertexts are dense. So cool, this is a fresh LHE encryption, but of something uniform. And that's not really useful. That's just a random bit string, actually. So now what they do is engineer this LHE of uniform noise to make it an LHE of some smudging size noise. that requires rounding, and we know we cannot do rounding under LHE. That's kind of the problem we are trying to solve. So what do? Well, you proxy re-encrypt again. So you turn this LHE into an FHE. That requires to have this guy here over here. So not that you already have a key cycle of size 2. And so you turn it into an FHE, then you can round, you can do whatever you want. And then you put it back in the LHE word. You put it back, you turn it back again in LHE. So you have basically crafted from something completely random an LHE of a smudging noise. It is appropriately of the appropriate magnitude. But the problem is, again, when you do this, we know that you're going to create an FHE decryption noise. And that's a problem because actually the smudging noise and the new created noise, this guy here, are correlated actually. That's not okay. You cannot smudge something if it's dependent. But, well, in practice, it's not clear how to use this correlation. So that's where the proof stops and the heuristic begins. They say, well, okay, you cannot exploit it in practice, so let's assume this is secure. So in fact, heuristically, it is secure. So our contribution was to replace these heuristic arguments and get a provable security under this SRL assumption, circular SRL assumption. So the key idea is to first replace the random oracle by a CRS. As Giulio mentioned, we can rely on XIO with pre-processing. That's sufficient for IO. So then we can afford to have CRS. That's straightforward. Most importantly, when we do this FHE evaluation, to break this correlation, statistical correlation, we basically refresh the FHE. So it means typically, like when you do an evaluation, it's deterministic. And here we will do it in a randomized way. And the results, the evaluated ciphertext, will look like it's a fresh ciphertext. So that's great. If it's fresh, there's no correlation, perfect. But there's a problem of doing this. When you do this, you actually have to reveal the random coins used to refresh. So that sounds dangerous. You're refreshing, but you're revealing the random coins used to refresh. It's even, well, surprising that it's useful at all, but it is. It helps break the correlation, as I said. And then it creates a new problem, but the problem is solved. It's captured by this SRL security. So in fact, you can actually deal with it. This random coin that you reveal, they're actually going to be some SRL leakage, essentially. That's what's remarkable. So what does that give? That gives some IO, or some functional encoding that gives IO, which is secure under this actually cycle of size 2 circular SRL security. And before I define only cycle of size 1, I didn't talk about LHE in my definition. I only talk about FHE. Because we didn't stop there. So that was the first step. All right, so by cycle of size 2, remember, I mean, FHE encrypts the secret key of the LHE, and the LHE encrypts the secret key of the FHE. So far, that's what we did. And this is just the first step. Then we actually realized, well, we can use specifically an LHE that is a new packed regab variant. And because GSW is also based on a regab encryption, essentially, they can use the same secret key. And it turned out to work. So that means instead of a cycle of size 2, you have 2 cycles of size 1. And then finally, we can just argue that this packed regev LHE is actually statistically circularly secure. So you can remove this cycle here. The proof is really similar to the same features for regev encryption. So regev encryption is also circularly secure. And so we end up having this theorem I advertised, which is provable security under just a circular SRL security of GSW and LWE. And also the good point is, like, this is plausibly post-quantum. If you use Damgarduric LHE, that would not be the case. That's something Julie already mentioned. To conclude, so we give this new IO construction from LWE and this strong heuristic assumption with respect to this new security SRL and well-known GSW, well-known FHE scheme. So on the negative side, and I actually didn't go so much into it by lack of time, and because it's a subtle thing, but SRL circular security, it is stronger for sure than circular security because you have extra leakage. It's actually there's some qualitative difference. So it's a more sophisticated notion for sure. However, the reason we believe it's secure is similar to why we believe the typical circular security is secure, because it's provable without the key cycle. And we think it is a natural notion. And so we can apply this general design principle, which just say that as long as it's natural scheme and natural security notion, you can just assume having an encrypted secret key doesn't break everything all of a sudden. So that completes my talk. And now I will let Daniel continue and present his construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Romain. I guess we are gonna maybe ask questions at the end.
I mean, you can ask now if it's okay. Yeah.
Sorry, Julio. Or if there is any question for Romain right now, while Daniel sets up.
Romain, can you again show, you know, it's a complicated thing, but where you actually get your hint, the compression on the hint? I just want to make sure where the meat is, right? Because the hint is where all the meat is, right? Well,
how do I get the
yeah,
Let me make sure I understand. You mean how do I get
where is the compression, right? So where is your, I just want to make sure, I don't know if you have it on one slide, where is your hint? So where is the meat of, I mean, like 90, where do we get the stuff, right? Where do we get XIO? Where do we get the compression, right? Where is the hint? Like in, you know, in the previous talk that was called the hint. So
yes.
in your construction, what's the hint?
Yeah, there's a hint. Can I share my screen quickly to show you?
Sorry, Daniel.
Okay, thanks. Yes. All right, here. So yeah, I'm a bit I'm using this notion that Julio briefly mentioned, functional encoding, which think of it as split FHE. So this is a hint, or yes, this hint or opening. It's more or less the same thing. It's here. Okay, this is a buggy construction. Yeah, it's here.
Basically, I see. Okay.
So how do we get it short? Because it's the evaluated randomness of an LHE ciphertext. So take an LHE, many LHE actually, operate on them. That will give evaluated LHE under some randomness. That's the hit, the randomness of the LHE. So for Vanguard-Jurek, the randomness is super short. The message is huge, but the randomness is very short. So that's why we get compression.
So you're saying formally you don't achieve split FHE, you go through the second route, functional encoding thing.
Yes, formally, yeah. Formally, we don't achieve, in our paper, we don't achieve split FHE. We have this relaxed notion functional encodings, which has been introduced by Daniel and Wojtek, by the way. Oh. In their paper, we did, so in our paper, we go straight to XIO, but we can frame it as a functional encoding, which is a relaxed split FHE.
So nobody does split FHE, everybody goes through functional encoding.
The original BDGM that I'm actually showing here went through split FHE.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question to Romain before we switch? Okay, thank you, Romain. So Daniel.
All right, great. Thanks. So thank you. Thanks, Julia and Romain. So I'm going to give you one more work in this area. And so Julia already told us about how to get I/O from split FHE, or a relaxed version of it that we call functional encodings. And Romain gave you one approach of constructing these functional encodings via some interplane of an FHE and a LHE, linear homomorphic encryption. And in this talk, I'm going to show you an alternate approach for constructing these functional encodings. And the way our approach works is that we rely on a building block, which is essentially just a variant of the Gentry, Sahai, and Waters fully homomorphic encryption. We call it the dual GSW crypto system. And Romain already alluded, it's the main benefit of it is actually that it just has short randomness. And so I'm going to show you what that is. And it turns out that this dual GSW crypto system almost directly gives you functional encoding. There's just one issue, it's not secure. And to make it secure, we need one more ingredient. And that ingredient is something called oblivious, in our work, is something called oblivious LW sampling. And this is a notion that we abstract out, we define it formally, but essentially it allows you to generate an LW sample in an oblivious way without knowing the corresponding secret. And we have a theorem that if you have this notion of oblivious LW sampling and the LW assumption, then that provably gives you functional encodings, which then gives you I/O. So in essence, we reduce the problem of I/O to this one building block, oblivious LW sampling. Once you have that module LW, you get I/O. And so we think this is nice because oblivious LW sampling seems like a significantly simpler primitive, in particular in contrast to I/O or functional encodings or functional encryption or many other primitives that we previously knew imply I/O. Oblivious LW sampling does not involve general computation, doesn't really even involve computation. So it seems very different in flavor than many of the other primitives. Unfortunately, we don't know how to build oblivious LW sampling from a standard assumption like LWE. Instead, we give a heuristic construction of this oblivious LW sampling, and we prove security under a new non-standard but relatively simple to state indistinguishable assumption, and it has the flavor of circular security. So let me just jump into it. Let me start by telling you about what learning with errors is, LWE. Very quickly, I assume most of you know it. This is just to set up some terminology and notation. So we have this random matrix A, and for this talk, you should think of A as this tall and thin matrix. And I'm going to give you a random linear combination of the columns of A. So that's A times S for random S, plus some error vector E, which is a short error vector. So each of the components of E is small, much smaller than Q, where all of this is done over ZQ. And I'm going to call this an LW sample with respect to the matrix A. Okay, and the LW assumption says that this LW sample is indistinguishable from a uniformly random and independent vector. So now let me tell you about the dual GSW encryption scheme. This is a crypto system. There's a crypto system that we define our work. As I said before, it's a relatively small variant of GSW. Except for this talk, I don't want to think about it as a fully homomorphic encryption because we're not going to talk about decryption. So instead, encryption without decryption is really, I'll call it a commitment scheme. So you can encrypt some data, nobody can decrypt it. So it's like a commitment. So I'm going to think about it as a homomorphic commitment scheme. And I'm not going to tell you the construction in detail. I'm just going to mention a few properties that will be key for this talk. So the public key of this crypto system is this LW matrix A, just like we had in the last slide, just a uniformly random matrix A. And there's a way to commit to some input X under this public key. This generates a commitment C. Using some randomness R. And I'm not going to show you how to do this, but this commitment is statistically binding. So X is fully determined by the commitment, and it's hiding under the LW assumption. Now, moreover, this commitment is fully homomorphic. So what that means is I can evaluate any function F over the committed data by operating on the commitment C. And I get some commitment C sub F, which is a commitment to the output of the function f of X. Now, I want to tell you a little bit more about this evaluate commitment C sub F, about the form of it. So here I'm going to think of a function f with m bit output. So it's not just one bit, it's several bits, m bits, where m is the height of the matrix A. And the commitment C sub F, this evaluate commitment, has the form of an LW sample, A times RF plus EF. So this is just an LW sample with respect to the matrix A, plus the function output f of X times Q over 2. And I can open this commitment by giving you the value R sub F. You can subtract out A times RF from the commitment, and you get f of X times Q over 2 plus the error, which lets you correct out the error and recover f of X. So essentially, this RF is a small, succinct opening to the commitment that reveals a much longer output. And moreover, I have an efficient way of computing this value RF by computing over the openings of the commitment. If I know the function f, the committed value x, and all of the randomness r, then I can compute this value RF. Okay, so essentially it's a homomorphic commitment where the opening is very small, much smaller than the committed value. And you can see that this crypto system almost directly can be used as a functional encoding. In particular, the encoding of a value x is just this public key A and the commitment. And the opening for a function f, so if I want to reveal the output of some function f over x, I'm just going to give you the opening of the homomorphically evaluated commitment. And now you can use this to recover f of x by doing the homomorphic computation, computing c of f, subtracting out a times rf, and you get f of x times q over 2 plus ef, which you can use to recover f of x. Okay, so great. So we have functional encoding. Are we done? Well, the good news is that the opening is small, which is what we wanted. The opening size is just n log q. And the output size is m, where m can be arbitrarily larger than n log q. So you can have much, much bigger output than opening size. But what about security? So the good news is that the encoding hides x under the LW assumption. That we can prove. But that's not the security property we wanted for functional encodings. There we wanted security to hold, even if I open the value of many functions on x, even if I give you the openings to various functions f of x. And here, unfortunately, that's not true. In particular, if I give you some openings to various functions f, if I give you these values rf, they may reveal more than just f of x. And in fact, there's a simple attack. If I give you enough openings, you can completely recover x. So the scheme is not secure. So as a warm-up, let me show you how to provably get just one opening security. So security, if I only open one function output f of x. I want to mention this is not enough for I/O. For I/O, we need many opening security. That's going to be harder. But let's start as a warm-up to just get opening security for one opening. So here's the idea. I'm just going to add a random LW sample AS star plus E star to the encoding. And I'm going to essentially use this sample to re-randomize the output. So I'm going to do the computation as before, but I'm also going to add in this AS star plus E star to the homomorphically computed output. And then when I give the opening, I'll give you not just the original RF, but RF plus S star. And it turns out that you can show that this is provably even simulation secure. I can simulate the encoding and the opening given just the function output. In essence, this S star completely blinds the sensitive value RF, and the E star blinds the sensitive value EF. That might reveal something more than you wanted. So that's great, but that only gives us one opening security. How do we go beyond that? So one idea you might have is let's just add not just one LW sample to the encoding, but let's add many LW samples. Let's say Q LW samples to get Q opening security. And the problem with that is that works. That does give you security. But then the encoding size grows with the number of openings I'm going to give out, and that's not allowed. The encoding size can be big, but it can't grow with the number of openings Q. It has to be independent of that. So that doesn't work. Another idea you might have is, so far we haven't used any kind of a common reference string. We are allowed to use one. Why not add these LW samples to a common reference string? So we are allowed to use a common reference string, but here in this construction, you need to also know the secret S star for the LW sample B star that's part of the encoding. And if these LW samples were just in the common reference string, you wouldn't have any secrets associated with them. So that doesn't work either. And so that's where oblivious LW sampling comes in. We're going to use oblivious LW sampling to essentially get the equivalent of just having many of these LW samples part of the encoding without making the encoding large. Okay, so I'm going to define this notion of oblivious LW sampling and show you essentially, well, I won't show you, I'll just claim that you can plug it into the previous construction and it'll work to give you a functional encoding. So let me give you the definition of this notion. I'm going to consider this notion in the CRS model, and the CRS could be structured, but in our case, it's just going to be a uniformly random string. So there's some CRS, and the CRS can be long. It can be as long as the number of LW samples you want to generate, but it should be independent of the matrix A for which you want to generate them. Now, in addition to CRS, I'm going to allow us to pre-process the matrix A for which we want to generate LW samples into some pre-processed value P. So this initialization procedure, pre-processing, can use some secret random coins, but I'm going to insist on P being small. So the CRS is big but independent of A, so it can't have many, you can't, let's say, put many LW samples in the CRS because it can't depend on A. On the other hand, the value P can depend on A, but it has to be small, much smaller than the number of LW samples you want to generate. And then there should be a deterministic procedure that takes the CRS and this preprocessed value P and outputs some number of LW samples, some QLW samples. Okay, so this should be deterministic. Essentially, CRS and P together determine these QLW samples. And for security, I want there to be a simulator who's going to be given as input some Q target LW samples that he wants this process to generate. And the simulator essentially can program the CRS and P to ensure that the resulting samples match the target values. So his goal for correctness is that the output of SAM, when the simulator programs the CRS and P, and you run SAM on them, you should get the values that the simulator is trying to hit, is given as targets. And the security says that you can't tell if you see the CRS, you see the matrix A, you see the preprocessed value P, and you see the openings of these LW samples. So you're also given the secrets SI in these LW samples. You still cannot tell whether these were generated, whether the CRS and P and A were generated as in the real distribution, or whether they were generated as in the simulated distribution. So this is a simple definition and would be ideal. If we had this, we'd be good. Actually, we're not quite going to achieve that. So we're going to allow for relaxation. And the relaxation is that when the simulator programs the CRS and this preprocessed value P, he doesn't have to get the sampler to output exactly the target value. So he's going to get some target values BI had. And when he programs the CRS and P, the sampler might output some BIs, which are a little different than the BI hats. But the difference between them, so essentially the output of the sampler is to be BI hat plus some LW sample for which the simulator knows the secret. So you have to almost get the sampler to output the BI hat modulo this extra LW sample for which the simulator knows the corresponding secret. And it turns out that this is good enough for the application because still essentially the BI hat part of the simulated samples is going to be good enough to blind out, to drown out any sensitive information that our previous openings would have leaked. And this extra LW sample, the AS tilde plus E tilde, doesn't hurt anything. Okay, so we're going to target this relaxed definition. So let me say something about this idea of oblivious LW sampling in general. So well, first of all, let me actually say, so we proved this theorem that if you have this oblivious LW sampler plus the LW assumption, then that lets you construct functional encodings. In fact, you get a simulation secure version of these in the CRS model. And as we saw before, that's enough to construct IO. So can we get this type of, what's known about oblivious LW sampling or oblivious sampling in general? So we actually know how to obliviously sample from all distributions, not just the specific LW distribution, but all distributions in a very strong sense, assuming that IO exists. In fact, there's going to be a talk tomorrow on pseudorandom encodings, which is equivalent to oblivious sampling. So, okay, so if I/O exists, then oblivious sampling is possible, and then you can construct the I/O. That's not that interesting, but at least it shows that oblivious LW sampling isn't like inherently impossible. We have a notion that's at least we can hope to get. And in fact, it was a previous open question if you can have oblivious sampling without I/O. It seems like a simpler primitive. Maybe you can do it without I/O. And so in our work, we say, no, well, it actually implies I/O. So you can interpret it negatively, like saying oblivious LW sampling is probably hard because it implies I/O. But I want you to interpret positively, like, yes, this is a good way to construct I/O. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to give you a heuristic construction or new construction of this oblivious LW sampling under a new assumption. And actually, the way our construction works is we're going to leverage this dual GSW crypto system again. So we used it once to build functional encodings if you're given oblivious LW sampling on the side. But we're also going to use dual GSW to construct oblivious LW sampling. So let me tell you what the construction looks like. So the CRS is just going to consist of a bunch of values in ZQ to the M, bunch of vectors in over ZQ to the M. These are just uniformly random. And the preprocessed version of the matrix A is going to consist of the matrix A itself and this GSW, dual GSW commitment to a PRF key K and a bit beta, which we're just going to set to 0 in real life. In the proof, we're going to play around with it. But in real life, it's just 0. And to generate, so now given the CRS and P, I want to generate many LW samples. And here's what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. We're going to homomorphically compute the following functions over the committed value, over K and beta. So this is a function that takes K and beta as input. It uses the PRF key K and the index I. So this is to generate the I sample. You're going to evaluate the function G sub I, and it's going to use PRF on K and I to sample some LW secrets S star and E star, and it's going to output an LW sample AS star plus E star plus this flag beta times the ith component of the CRS. But remember that beta is 0, so it's just going to output AS star plus E star. Okay, now that's not the output of SAM. We're homomorphically evaluating these function G sub I. And so the output of SAM is a commitment to the output Y of this function G sub I. But remember the commitment, this evaluate commitment is just an LW sample plus Y, plus the committed, plus the value of committing to. So I changed things a little bit here. I'm evaluating function whose output isn't M bits, but actually MZQ elements. And it turns out I can do that as well. So I don't have the, before I had like Y times Q over 2. Now I don't have the Q over 2. Here Y itself, the output itself is in ZQ to them. Okay, so this is what the output of the, this is what the ith sample looks like. So Y is the output of this function G sub I, and RG and EG are just some randomness that comes from the homomorphic evaluation process. Now, if I expand it out, then the output, this Y is just AS star plus E star, because again, remember beta is 0. And so let me just group it together. So the output of the sample is this LW sample that includes this random S star and E star, these pseudorandom values. Now here's how the simulator is going to work. He gets these target values BI hat, and the simulator is just going to put these values in the CRS and change the bit to beta equals 1. Now when that happens, the output of the function GI includes this B hat component that comes from the CRS. And so essentially the output of the sampler, you manage to program the output of the sampler to include this extra LW sample that's in the CRS. So that lets the simulator program the output. Okay, And our assumption is essentially that this is secure, which translates to the following assumption, relatively simple to state assumption. So essentially it says that you cannot distinguish between the case beta equals 0 and beta equals 1 in the following distribution. I'm going to give you this LW matrix A. I'm going to give you a bunch of LW samples, BI hats. I'm going to give you this commitment, this dual GSW commitment to PRF key K and the bit beta itself. And if I stop there, then everything would be secure under LWE. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to give you some additional values, namely some openings SI. So let me tell you what these SIs are. So the SIs just come from homomorphically evaluating this function G sub I over the committed values. So this is the output of the function you get. And let me just, by expanding out what this BI hat is, it looks like this. And the SI is just the opening of this commitment. So this is what it looks like. So let me see if I can get a pointer over here. OK, good. So you can see that there's this pseudorandom value SI star. And the hope is that this SI star, which is the output of a PRF, is hiding any sensitive information that might be contained in the RGI and the beta value here. Essentially, it doesn't let you prevent you from being able to tell if beta is 0 or 1, and also hides the sensitive information RGI that depends on the committed randomness. Now, this assumption, so this is the assumption. And it essentially has a flavor of circularity. The reason is that we want this PRF output as sub I star to protect this randomness RGI that depends on the commitment randomness. So if RGI is sensitive, if I revealed it, all security would be lost. So I need SI star to somehow hide this RGI, also to hide the bit beta. On the other hand, I need the commitment randomness. The commitment itself is protecting the PRF key K, which is responsible for generating this SI star. So somehow I have this circularity in this assumption. OK, so that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Let me just end with a few words trying to compare the 3 works that you heard about in this talk. So I think in some way, even though the constructions may appear different, they share a lot of conceptual similarity. And we're still trying to figure out exactly how they are similar and how they are different on a more formal level. But I think the reasoning or the intuition behind why you hope that these constructions are secure is in some sense very similar. So all of these works rely on some non-standard assumption that has a circular security flavor. And the concrete assumptions are different between these works. In our work, we focus on just giving making the assumptions simple to state. So in particular, it doesn't involve any general computation, it's non-interactive. We try to just give a nice algebraic statement of the assumption. Whereas GP20 and BDGM20 made this circularity flavor more explicit and focus on the assumption fitting this nice abstract framework that you can prove security without a key cycle and you assume security with a key cycle. So the circular security flavors come to all these assumptions. I think both Julia and Roman mentioned that these assumptions are qualitatively a little different than basic circular security. Let's say what you need for to go for FHE. And I want to go into a little more depth. So I think one big difference between the assumptions that's needed for all 3 of these works versus, let's say, circular security of FHE is that in FHE, we're hoping that if I give you an encrypted key cycle, it doesn't hurt semantic security. But when it comes to fully homomorphic encryption, it's not clear. The adversary can't really tell the difference whether he's, or we're hoping that the adversary can't tell the difference between getting an encrypted key cycle versus not. In other words, the adversary, even though we need a key cycle, let's say, to get correctness for FHE, the adversary can't tell if there's correctness or not in the scheme. Whereas in all our settings, we need this circularity let's say we need the key cycle or some form of circularity for correctness, and the adversary can easily tell whether correctness holds or not. So there's no, we don't have, we're not in a, or we're in a setting where it's easy for the adversary to tell that there is circularity involved, and you can't easily or hope to replace the circularity, remove it, and hope that the adversary doesn't notice. We know that correctness would stop holding and the adversary would notice. So I think that's one aspect that makes these a little different. I think we still need to understand better, you know, what's needed for this type of security. So let me just leave with a few open questions. I think major open question is to get a better understanding of these new assumptions, try to connect them to other things or more connections even between the assumptions in the 3 different works. And of course, to get new instantiations of either functional encodings or oblivious LW sampling, I'm hoping that these are good intermediate tools for, or good high-level approaches for constructing I/O that should be fruitful even beyond the concrete instantiations that these works offer. And lastly, I think one big open question is to get I/O from just the learning with errors assumption. So that's the holy grail here. Okay, so let me end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, and thanks all the speakers. You guys did an amazing job coordinating. This was great. So do we have any question for Daniel or Julio or Romain? So maybe while we wait for questions, well, in all 3 talks, you guys need a CRS. It was not obvious to me if the CRS can be reusable across many obfuscations. It seems like the CRS is independent on the function you're obfuscating, right?
Yeah, so, by standard hybrid argument, you can reuse the CRS. There's no trapdoor needed for it to create the obfuscation, so it's reusable.
Great, and the size is also fixed, like it's a constant. It only depends on security parameter.
No, actually, so that's one of the points that that makes our life easier. That we can even make the CRS very long, and still XIO with a long CRS implies IO without a CRS. So the CRS in the XIO can be as long as the entire truth table of the function.
Gotcha.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a tricky question because I'm not part of this community. As you all know, there is a tension between theoretical computer science and practical computer science, let's say. That tension exists in all fields, and in cryptography, it's actually gotten rather close. I mean, these have gotten rather close together. We really have good theoretical concepts that can be implemented and are very close to practical. In the field of obfuscation, my perception has always been that this gap is much wider. And I remember there was a paper on which Jonathan Katz was an author, in which they ended up obfuscating a function which I think was 15 AND gates, and they ended up with something which was 3 gigabytes in size and took hours to evaluate. Now, I don't mean to throw up this example as you know, sort of pissing in your garden or something. That's not the point. The point is that if we're going to bring these closer together, the practice and the theory, something's going to have to give. We're either going to have to weaken our definitions, come up with new kinds of constructions, or examine the sort of basic problem from a different point of view. And I'm curious if you guys have any opinions on how we might actually close this gap a bit more. Where are they going to come from? Is it going to be through loosening the polynomial expansion assumptions, or is it going to be through weaker models than IO? What will it be?
I mean, I'll give a quick answer. I think here this is like a very immature area, and we still don't have the right approach for constructing IO. So I think we're still, you know, it's not just that there's a gap between theory and practice. It's even the theory itself is immature. You know, we don't have the constructions are extremely complicated. The assumptions are complicated. So I think we're still looking for even very high level approaches to do this. And I'm hoping, maybe some of these ideas like oblivious LW sampling or functional encodings could be useful in the eventual construction, but I don't think we're there yet. We don't have even the right theory construction that we can start optimizing. So we're real at the beginnings of this research.
So
maybe others can answer as well.
Yeah, I agree with what Daniel said. And also maybe, is it like, can we hope that a tool that powerful that can build pretty much any object in the crypto area be efficient in practice? Is it, I mean, probably like for any specific application, a customized scheme will be more efficient than using IO to build it. Also, so that IO will be more like a feasibility. It will tell you if it's possible to build it or not, but probably is not going to be the most efficient implementation, even if IO ends up being efficient. And clearly, we're not there yet. I agree with Daniel. Yeah, it's not the priority. And also, is it even like the goal of IO to be the efficient way? I'm not sure.
So if I can add something, I mean, so first of all, I completely agree with Daniel and Romain. Maybe just to give, like the big bottleneck of efficiency, I think like all we showed in these works, this is like something that is not that bad. Like, I mean, it's still within like human parameters, right? But like where things starts becoming astronomical is the steps that we didn't show. So for example, XIO to IO, then you get like nonsensical, like it's constant, but like non-human constants. And then that's the place that you really want to either optimize or like try to circumvent if you want to build IO efficiently. Maybe like this was like a less philosophical answer, more practical.
Also, going back to philosophy, I mean, usually the time that it takes from everybody knows you cannot do that at all to having it actually working in practice is a generation more than like a couple of years. So we're really early in that process.
Is it fair also to say, I don't know if it's true, but from my understanding, the other paper, I guess, based on 4 assumptions, so that paper, yes, it's very clean, but it also uses this XIO to IO step. Is it fair to characterize that paper is like 3 levels of magnitude less efficient than this? Right, so at least in terms of not assumptions, but the steps, we did make like 3 order of magnitudes improvement. Is it fair?
So I think so go on then.
I mean, I think that the key step, like going from, we go through XIO, that one goes through functional encryption, but that step I think is in common. I don't know if there are other steps. There might be additional like compilers involved in that paper that we avoid. But I don't think anyone's really optimizing these works yet, and that's not the goal. I think the bigger maybe distinction is conceptual simplicity. I think these works are significant. So I don't think we should be comparing efficiency. It's just meaningless. It's between astronomical and super astronomical or something. But I think one thing is that the works presented now are somewhat conceptually simpler than the other approach. Julia, do you want to add something?
No, thank you. Yeah, you covered.
This is Hotek. I guess the way I see it is that, if we draw an analogy with FHE, we're sort of in the world of Gen 309 FHE. So we are going to need the, the BVs and and all of the other constructions before we start thinking about optimizations in practice.
Well, I didn't mean to pull you off the rails of, pursuing the theoretical approach that you've done so much as just, we'd like to keep grounded on, where does this actually fall into the hierarchy of practical methods? It does seem a bit early.
All right. Thank you for these great comments. We have a comment from Moti from the chat. the gap is still between theory and theory. That's true. Do we have any more questions for the speakers?
I think Moti's comment is obfuscated.
Okay. All right, so really thanks to all the speakers again. It was really great. Your explanation was very well synchronized. So thank you so much for the effort and for the time. And thanks everybody for showing up at the workshop. And I will see you tomorrow for the next talk.
Thank you.